Hello, everyone. This is StrawberryShorty here with Wednesday. I guess they are chapters, not episodes. Chapter 3, Friend or Woe. So, still not super crazy about the title, but at least woe rhymes with foe, and it kind of makes more sense than the previous title. We're definitely going for a naming theme here, though. So, we pick up with Wednesday tied up in what looks like the same room, but surrounded by a bunch of cloaked people. And one of them starts talking to her in a strange voice, and my immediate instinct was Bianca, even though it didn't exactly sound like her. Like, it sounded like a guy. But it was, in fact, Bianca just doing something to her voice. And yeah, so these people, like, she's antagonizing them, even though they could be killers, just kind of immediately dismisses them as just high school, like some kind of high school group thing. Doesn't actually consider they could be something to be worried about. And they pretty much blame everything on Rowan. Like, that they say that he's... Well, no, they're not the ones who blame Rowan. I'm totally getting mixed up. You just watch this episode, too. It's these hour-long episodes. She blames Rowan. She says that's how she found them. It's like, oh, Rowan told me. Rowan didn't technically tell you. The merman is also there, still with a bruised eye. But, yeah, so it turns out that this apparently really is just a weird high school type fraternity, sorority-esque group. It doesn't really seem that interesting. Like, they don't appear to actually be any kind of secret society. Like, they're not plotting anything, and they don't really look like they're partying either. I mean, they kind of hint that they do that, but they're just kind of hanging out in this dark room in cloaks. So, yeah, I don't know. And they're like, oh, what should we do with her? Oh, no. I keep getting mixed up. Apparently, the Nightshades originally were dismantled 30 years ago when, according to them, some normie died. So that's interesting, especially since, what would a normie have to do with that? Think it's tied to the whole Gomez thing? They specifically said a kid, I think, so who knows? Anyway, they talk about what to do with her. Xavier suggests they let her pledge. I don't ever want to pledge for any kind of fraternity or sorority. It just sounds horrifying. But Bianca is against the idea. And she says it's because, like, oh, you want to have her as part of a group after what she pulled at the Po Cup, which is the big canoe thing. And I find this statement really weird. First, because Bianca pulled a bunch of stuff. But also because that's apparently totally allowed because there are no rules, so everyone is allowed to engage in sabotage. She didn't actually do anything super controversial either, so... I mean, maybe kind of socking that one dude in the face, but even that was thing. And... yeah, so... We cut to... Wednesday has basically freed herself, and she just kind of walks out. She doesn't want to join their group. She's disappointed by this whole revelation that they were just a bunch of dumb high school kids. So we cut to her, after she leaves, in her room where she's reading the book, and we don't get to know any of what she's reading, which is a bummer. And then we cut to the headmistress and everyone else gathered in, like, the courtyard. And they're talking about some sort of outreach program in Jericho. Everyone has to go and do volunteer work for the day, and they're going to unveil some memorial statue. And I feel like this is going to be significant. And Enid is super stoked because she got Pilgrim World. Because everyone is really into Pilgrim World in this show for some reason. Wednesday gets an antique store, which sounds way better. And Enid kind of talks a bit about how she has a crush on some kid. Apparently his name is Ajax. I believe he is the Gorgon from the first episode who she briefly talks to. But, yeah. So, the headmistress talks to Wednesday and reveals that she volunteered her for performing with some of the other students for the statue's unveiling because she caught her rooftop cello performance. And it's like, how did you even know that was her? Like, you couldn't have been able to see her. And don't volunteer her for stuff. Like, you shouldn't volunteer a student for something that they might not want to do, might not be comfortable doing, might not be prepared for. Like, for me, when I played piano, I never actually learned how to read music. I just memorized stuff. Probably should have learned how to read music. But anyway. So, let's see. Try to remember where I get left off. I swear. Oh yeah. She heads into town with everyone else, and after getting off the bus or whatever, runs into Xavier, who is looking at a blank wall and talking about how it wasn't blank during the last outreach day. I kind of took that to mean that he did like graffiti and it got painted over, but maybe it means something else. I don't know. It's definitely a sus paint job. It's just like a bunch of white paint on a brick building. And she's like, oh, you remember that book I showed you last night? And it's like, did that happen? Like, I don't remember you showing him a book. When did you show him a book? And he mentions how he had seen it before when him and Rowan fought. He assumed when he saw it that Rowan had stole it after they kicked him out. They did mention kicking Rowan out. I am curious why. I think they said something about him being weird, but I don't know if they elaborated. But that's what they were apparently fighting about. So maybe Xavier just like stormed out of the room, and that's how he ended up able to save Wednesday. And when he sees the drawing, because she shows him the drawing, he also thinks that the girl in the drawing is her. But he also recognizes the man, who is apparently a pilgrim, as Joseph Crackstone, the town's founder. And I just don't know how everyone is able to figure out who these people are, because these are basically silhouettes with vague features. Like, that dude could be any pilgrim in existence. And that Wednesday-esque girl could be any braided girl in existence. But they're like, no, that's definitely Wednesday. That's definitely Joseph Crackstone. But yeah. So we see the one of the bullies again. The black one whose dad runs Pilgrim World. And his name is apparently Lucas. And his dad, who I swear looks like the director guy off NCIS, but I don't think it's him. His dad is the mayor and the runner of Pilgrim World, and was apparently former sheriff. And he gives a lecture to current sheriff and is like, find that bear, which, you know, the bear that is killing everyone and ripping them to shreds. I've never seen what a bear killing looks like, but I don't know. It seems a bit aggressive for a bear. Maybe that cocaine bear or whatever everyone's talking about. And he talks with the headmistress, and she's a tall woman. Like, is she wearing heels, or is she just naturally tall? Because I think that was a thing where that actress played someone in Game of Thrones who was, like, supposedly really tall, but yeah. So Wednesday now wants to go to Pilgrim World because she wants to learn more about Joseph Crackstone, so she tries to convince Enid to trade with her. Enid really wants to go to Pilgrim World for some reason. But she agrees to trade after Wednesday reveals that Ajax, the guy she has a crush on, who has the name of a cleaning product, is apparently also working at the antique shop. I don't know why two students need to be working at this antique shop. But they trade. We see people heading into Pilgrim World, and they are so excited. There are no rides here. This is not even like a Renaissance festival. Like, it looks really boring. Like, maybe a little bit interesting historically, but I don't get this excitement. We meet an employee dressed as a pilgrim whose name is Arlene, and she's very polite, but comes across as really sus. She gives us a little bit of a history lesson about the town. It's nice to hear, it's nice to learn stuff like that. I wouldn't mind visiting this place, but I don't think I'd be that excited. Wednesday expresses an interest in the meeting hall, which is basically, which she had previously learned was a museum filled with Joseph Crackstone artifacts, but learns that it is unfortunately being renovated. Instead, they're all going to be working at a fudgery, which, yeah, that makes sense. And I'm just like, are we going to have Wednesday in a pilgrim costume? We cut to the antique shop, which, they call it an antique shop. There are no antiques. It is more like a taxidermy shop. Lots of rats in poses and costumes. It's odd. Like, not my kind of thing, kind of art, but a little odd. And Enid and Ajax are very creeped out by this, and the woman stops them from taking a break to the coffee shop to escape by saying she's going to make some mushroom tea. What does mushroom tea taste like? I'm not sure I want to know. Anyway, back to Wednesday. She is, as expected, in a pilgrim costume, and she is trying to offer samples to a bunch of I'm gonna call them tourists. And she's speaking in another language. It sounds like German. I don't know what she's saying. And I can't imagine they do either, but by the time she's done, no one eats any of her samples. They all look disgusted and they walk away, and I'm like, I'm not sure why. This seems like a strange reaction. Oh, and we catch a glimpse of a bunch of dolls in the background. I love dolls. I'm not sure why they're there in the fudge shop, but, you know. And outside, the bullies in their pilgrim outfits are all there and again harassing innocent people. This time they're harassing the bee kid, whose name I still do not know. And they're like shoving him around and really ticking me off. And then he starts to look sick and I'm like, please throw up on them. And he does, and it's awesome. But then they start, like, they try to throw him in the stockade, which again is really messed up. These guys need to be in jail. Especially when Wednesday intervenes to stop them, and they try to put her in the stockade. Like, a bunch of grown freaking men bullying a teenage girl, a small teenage girl. Like, it's so disgusting. Like, seriously, I hate these dudes. And as you might expect, she utterly kicks their butts, and then takes Bee Kid to go help him get cleaned up. Cut to the coffee house, which is apparently called the Weather Vane, and we have a meeting between the mayor and Headmaster Weems. And the mayor thanks her for a donation, and they don't say anything super sus, but I kind of get the feeling there might be something going on behind the scenes between these two. The plant lady, who is finally introduced again, or more properly, as Thornhill, she shows up, and the mayor makes a comment like, oh, haven't we met before? And she says that they've met before in the coffee shop because she sees him around. They haven't really met, but I'm not sure that's true. I'm telling you, she's going to be connected to something in the past. I think I start to have suspicions later on, but I'll address that when I get to them. And apparently the headmistress has tasked her with keeping an eye on Wednesday. And she swears to do this. But it's like, you're at the coffee shop. Like, you think Wednesday is at the antique store, but you're not even there. You're not at Pilgrim World, so how are you even remotely keeping an eye on her? Why are you in the coffee shop? Like, it doesn't really make sense. But anyway, we cut to Wednesday caring for the bee kid. It says she clearly cares. So I like when she protects the weak. But she says that he reminds her of her brother, except she doesn't feel the urge to kill him. And she gets him to be the lookout while she sneaks into the meeting hall, which does not look like it is under any renovation. And she comments on how, I think it was an aunt of hers told her that secrets are like zombies, they never truly die. And it makes me think of the blonde girl, that there's going to be some secret involving the blonde girl, and we see like a painting of the pilgrims and Crackstone standing by a fire, and I'm just like, we're gonna get a witches storyline here? Because you know how it is with Pilgrims and Fire. It's always witches. And sure enough, Wednesday suddenly notices in the corner of the painting, there's the blonde girl. Arlene speaks with Bianca, wondering where Wednesday has disappeared to. And Bianca's like, well, if I know her, she's probably somewhere she shouldn't be. Only she says it in like old school English, which is pretty funny. But we flash back to Wednesday, who opens a display case and takes out a book and notices that it is seemingly blank inside. I'm just thinking she should pocket it, read it later. Or maybe it's written in invisible ink, but like pocket it, check it later before you get caught. And she checks the background, it has the name Etsy on it. And at first, I thought this was like the name Etsy. Like, I'm just realizing this now. I thought that like they were talking about, that it was maybe going to be the name of the blonde girl, Because she addresses it as a name. She's like, Etsy, that doesn't sound like an old school settler. But now I think that they're trying to say that the book was bought off of Etsy. I'm kind of embarrassed I didn't realize that. As I expected, Arlene shows up and claims the original book was stolen last month during their witch trial. Because, yeah, that's fun to remember. And Wednesday claims that most of what they have probably isn't authentic, and yet they still charge $29.95 to get in, which, $29.95? Like, there's nothing here except fudge, and you gotta pay for the fudge unless you eat a sample. So, back to the antique shop. There's a kind of suspicious, rather homely-looking man messing with a camera. Enid is like, "Hey, can I help you?" But he rushes off, and he's a little mean. Like kind of seems like he might have a problem with her, but it's hard to tell. Enid and Ajax talk, and they're looking at these taxidermied rats that are getting married, and they kind of start to talk about like the different types of supernatural creatures and how some of them avoid each other and don't want to hook up. And it kind of makes me think, like, what would happen if a different type, like if a werewolf and a vampire got married and had a kid, like, what would that kid be? Would they be both, one or the other? Like, I'm very curious about this. They kind of bond, and it's kind of sweet. And Ajax mentions Xavier, so I'm like, oh, thank goodness, Xavier is his name. Because I was still kind of inwardly struggling with whether it was Xavier or Xander. Because I'm pretty sure I was inwardly calling him Xander for a while. And he mentions how Xavier has a darker side and struggles under the weight of his famous father. And I'm like, who's his father? What's going on there? And apparently he can stone someone, which makes sense for a Gorgon. But Enid reveals that she wouldn't mind getting stoned by him. Okay. Because it's apparently only temporary. And she kind of hints that they should meet behind the greenhouse. She's like, oh, I'm going to be at out behind the greenhouse tonight. And despite everything they've been talking about, he's like, oh, we'll have a good time, because he's dense as heck. She finally just blurts out that she's trying to ask him out. He seemingly agrees. And, yeah, very weird. So, I wrote down deserted. I'm not sure what I said was deserted. I forget too much. Because I know Wednesday ends up at the coffee shop. I don't know what's deserted. I hate that I can't remember. I wish I could pause this, but I'm worried I'm going to get too close to 30 again. But Wednesday is at the coffee shop. Oh, maybe that's what I mean about deserted. Like, she deserted her job. I think that is it. She just deserted her job, and like somehow that was allowed. Xavier's at the coffee shop, reminds her what he said about Tyler, because she's there to look for Tyler. And she's just like, I'll talk to who I want. She asks Tyler about the meeting house and learns it is in the woods. Isn't everything. And I'm wondering if we're going to see that shady customer in the woods, because Tyler mentions how there's like squatters hanging out there and it's dangerous. You have to take her there in about an hour, because this boy will not skip work. Like, he's always like, can you wait an hour? Can you wait 2 hours? And it's like, no, she's not. She's not going to wait. Especially since that memorial unveiling thing is going to happen, and her absence will be noted. She also mentions how one of her uncles went to prison for eating Girl Scouts, so again, wondering if that is Fester or some other uncle. She finds the old meeting house, and much like Tyler said, it really is a ruin. There's like nothing there. She just drops her bag on the floor, which I don't think is smart. Like, that's dirty. And while she's looking around, as I expected, that customer shows up. Apparently he's been squatting in the house. He ends up being completely irrelevant in this part, however, because she just has Thing attack him and he runs off. And she's disappointed. She's wandering around, finding nothing. Thing kind of tells her to try triggering her psychic powers, and she's like, it doesn't work. It doesn't work when I touch stuff. And the whole time she's running around touching stuff and like mocking him. I'm like, is it gonna happen? And it doesn't. And then she's talking about her visions and how they don't just trigger while she's walking towards the door. And I'm like, she's gonna get a vision as soon as she goes to the door, isn't she? And she does. And it's of the Pilgrim days, where we see the blonde girl, the blonde Wednesday, being harassed, pushed, as she's surrounded by a crowd of pilgrims with torches. And we can all see where this is going. But so the girl is apparently an Adams, Goody Adams, which, odd name. I could not hear her name. I actually had to look it up. But she is accused of witchcraft. Again, no surprise. And you just kind of know that Pilgrim guy, who's supposed to be Crackstone, is lying. And she accuses him of being the evil one, and talks about how they came and they ruined the land, and the outcasts had been living in peace with like the spirits and whatnot. And she cuts him with a knife, but apparently she only cuts his cheek. It's like, you should have aimed for the throat, girl. He grabs her, throws her into like the meeting house maybe, a big room, where a bunch of, I guess, the outcasts are all chained up. And then they subsequently burn the place because they want to kill all the outcasts because they're blaming them for everything. Goody tries to free her mother, but is urged by her to escape and avenge the outcasts. Wednesday suddenly finds herself in the forest where Goody sees her and warns her that, Crackstone will not stop until he's killed them all. When Wednesday returns to reality, I'm like, go for the trapdoor, see if there's anything in there. Instead, she tells Thing about how she saw Goody Adams, and it's like, oh, now you say her name after I just looked it up. They hear something. It turns out to be the monster, but the monster does not stick around. It runs off. I don't know if she's running away from it or she's running after it, but she runs. I'm like, oh, but the trapdoor, I really think you should check that out. I want to know where it goes. She doesn't do that. She finds human footprints, which tells her that the monster is human, which I don't know if that's the most convincing argument, because, I can buy that the footprints belong to the monster, but, when you say human, does that mean normie or outcast considered human? And, was I the only one who thought it was going to be human from the start? Because you gotta have a twist in these kind of shows, right? Xavier shows up because he apparently followed Wednesday after overhearing her in the coffee shop. She tells him about the footprints and tries to show him, but the rain washed them away. And he now believes her that Rowan is actually dead, because he reveals that while Rowan had never been responding to his texts, when he texted them about meeting up to go snowboarding again, Rowan suddenly was quick to answer that he couldn't make it, except they never went snowboarding, which I'll admit is pretty clever. And Wednesday admits that she was there trying to learn about Joseph Crackstone. I can't help but think there were easier ways to do this. You could go to the library at the very least. Try Google, Well, maybe Wednesday doesn't know about Google. But Xavier reveals that he knows Wednesday has been having visions, and she tells him she's been having them since last year. We finally learn about his dad. His dad is a famous psychic called Vincent Thorpe, and Pugsley is apparently a big fan. Xavier says that his father would say visions can't be trusted as they only show one part of the picture, and he's not wrong. I said this a lot last episode. I don't think you can fully trust the visions. But they both kind of go on and on about how, Wednesday's in the picture with Crackstone. I think Wednesday is the one saying it, oh, I'm in this picture, Crackstone is in this picture, we're in the courtyard, this is relevant. And I'm again, trying to figure out why everyone is putting solid identities on these two people that are very vaguely drawn. But, yeah. And Wednesday asks him if he's mansplaining her visions, which, can we stop having female characters use the word mansplaining? It drives me crazy. Wednesday also kind of admits in a speakover that she is actually scared of Crackstone. And apparently he's being honored and all that, and there's no record of him being a mass murderer. The statue that's unveiled is this fountain statue of him. And Wednesday is going along with playing a disturbingly upbeat song, and I'm fully expecting she's going to steal the show and start playing something else. Before she can do that, Thing starts a fire. And the fire fuse thing goes all the way to the statue, and there's a big explosion of flame. And that's stupidly dangerous. I'm surprised no one got killed. There were people close to that. And it's do statues burn? They don't burn. Why would you set a fire? And Wednesday also said she was trying to keep a low profile earlier, so I'm not sure why she did this. And the headmistress is freaked out, and then she notices Wednesday, who is still sitting, not panicked, and playing a completely different song. So, of course, she knows Wednesday is to blame. We're shown this really horrifying scene of the statue's face melting, so I guess they don't burn, but they melt a little bit. Kind of freaky. But we cut to Wednesday in the headmistress's office, where the headmistress is, knows she did it. I'm just deny everything, and of course she does. She insists her hands are clean, which they are, because Thing was the one who did everything, as they show us in a flashback. And Wednesday, not being careful at all, pretty much openly admits that she knows Crackstone was a bad guy, and that the truth is being covered up. The headmistress knows the truth, but thinks they shouldn't reveal it, and wants to use it as an opportunity to, bond everyone. But Wednesday, is just no one really, they still hate us, They're just pretending not to hate us now. Though the headmistress does mention how, it's not, the truth, there's shades of gray. It's not all black and white. I'm overall team truth. I don't like hiding things. It would depend on the specifics, obviously, but Like, the people that died deserve justice. The truth should be known. Joseph Crackstone should not just be honored if he massacred a bunch of innocent people. And she finally lets Wednesday go, acknowledging that Wednesday is tiring, but reminds her, she doesn't tire easily. At this point, we see some other stuff. We see the meeting hall place where the camera is being fiddled with, the camera that the squatter guy was looking at. And at first I'm thinking, oh, he stole that camera. I do kind of still think he stole. I'm not sure why he'd steal a camera. But then suddenly the squatter enters the meeting hall and is attacked, and it's the monster. The monster is attacking him. And the camera keeps going off, and I'm not sure what the frick is going on. It's very, very odd. How is the camera going off? Did he set it to go off? Why is he doing this? It kind of feels like the monster is trying to prove his own existence, which, hey, that's really helpful. But Enid is getting ready for her date. I kind of like that top with that hat, but I don't think she ends up wearing it. It's too colorful. Wednesday doesn't like it. When Enid is talking about, oh, who would do that with the statue? I didn't get to perform. That person must be a total psychopath or something like that. I totally thought she'd figure out it was Wednesday, but she didn't. She goes off for her date, and I'm just like, I think this is going to end badly. And then we see a bunch of snippets of everyone doing things. The bee kid is looking at mushrooms in the forest and sees the police. Thornhill walks up to the statue that leads to the secret area and does the snaps. And it makes me kind of suspect that maybe she's going to be connected to the kid that died with the nightshades when they were, we see Ajax going to take a shower, puts a towel on the mirror, but then the towel falls off. And I'm not sure if this is sabotage or an accident, but when he tries to leave the shower, he stones himself. And hopefully it's not permanent for him. Enid is alone and waiting. Weems is drinking, and we see her ripping Morticia's page out of the yearbook, crumpling it up and throwing it into a fire. It's revealed that the therapist is the rat artist. And I meant to say this earlier, but you can't spell art without rat. Think about that. And we see bad tub. Oh yeah. Tyler is in the bathtub. It looks super gross. I guess they don't pay the sheriff very well. And he screams underwater. We see a furious Enid just ripping stuff up with her claws. And then we see probably the most interesting thing. We see Xavier leaving a shed-looking place. I don't know if we're supposed to recognize this. And returning a chain and padlock to it. And he has 2 long red scratches on his neck. Super sus. The police find the body and the camera. We see the photos get developed, and we don't get the clearest view of the photo, but we see what appears to be the monster's face. So it appears that the monster was trying to prove its own existence for some reason. Maybe for our sake? Who knows? I'm still not sure who the monster is. I don't think the monster is Enid, though. But, yeah. I think, people want to assume it's Tyler or Xavier. That seems like the most obvious thing, but I want it to be someone else, because that's such a boring explanation for it to be the 2 obvious people. Because Tyler was in the forest, and he has those weird cuts on his neck. Or, Xavier, was in the forest. And Tyler, just because he's just a normal human. And wouldn't that be more of a thing with him being the sheriff's son? Oh, your son is the murderer. But I hope it's not either of them. I want it to be someone who seems completely irrelevant. But, anyway, I gotta stop this. I'm 28 minutes and 30 seconds in. I'm really liking the show so far. I find myself wanting to keep watching, and I'm super excited to see where it goes next, so that's a good sign. I haven't felt this way about a show in a long time. So what did you think of this episode? Who do you think the monster is? Don't spoil it if you already know it. If you maybe had theories while you were watching, if you're watching this after seeing the whole thing, share your current theories, but don't spoil if those theories were correct or incorrect. But thank you for watching. I can't remember what I usually say. Please leave a comment. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!